North Platte, Nebraska, 1881. The letter Jeremiah Cole sent to the Plains Union matrimonial office in Omaha was not remarkable at first. It had the usual things: acreage, livestock, a church within riding distance, a house that did not leak, unless the wind came from the wrong direction. But near the bottom, after the practical details and before his careful signature, Jeremiah added one request that made the office clerk stop sorting mail. He wanted a wife nobody handsome would have chosen first. That was how he put it. Not pretty, not admired, preferably overlooked. The clerk read the line twice, then carried the letter to Mrs. Lottie Vane, who owned the office and had matched farmers with widows, schoolteachers with merchants, and lonely men with practical women from Missouri to Dakota Territory. Mrs. Vane read the letter once. Then she read it again. Then she said, "Well, at least he is honest about being a fool." Jeremiah Cole was 37 years old, broad through the shoulders, quiet in the mouth, and brown from 13 years under a Platte County sun. He had 73 fenced acres along Birdwood Creek, 41 head of cattle, a milk cow that hated everyone, and a two-room house made of cottonwood boards and stubbornness. In 1881, that made him respectable, not rich, not poor, respectable, and Jeremiah knew exactly why respectable could still be left. 3 years earlier, he had courted a woman named Clara Voss, a visiting schoolteacher with a laugh that made men forget the price of corn. Clara had listened to Jeremiah talk about wells and grazing rights all summer. She had accepted rides to church, pieced a quilt beside his sister, and let the entire county assume an engagement would come before frost. Then a banker from Kearney arrived with polished boots, a brick house, and a buggy with varnished wheels. Clara married him before Thanksgiving. Jeremiah did not rage. He did not drink himself stupid. He did something worse. He built a theory. Beauty had choices. Choices made a person compare. Comparison made a person leave. Therefore, he decided the safest wife was a woman the world had already passed over. A plain woman would not stare at 73 acres and wonder what lay beyond them. A plain woman would not measure his house against a banker's parlor. A plain woman, Jeremiah thought, would understand a good bargain when one stood in front of her wearing work boots and a clean shirt. It was a cruel theory, mostly because he believed it was practical. It was also about to be ruined by the only woman in 3 counties who could have enjoyed the joke. Mrs. Lottie Vane did not have an ugly woman in her registry. She had widows with children, women with tempers, women with debts, women who could cook for threshing crews without blinking, and one German seamstress who called herself plain because she wore spectacles. What she did have was a letter from Miss Mara Whitcomb of Council Bluffs. Mara was 29, unmarried, and described herself as follows: useful in a kitchen, steady in a sick room, capable with accounts, serviceable in weather, unremarkable in face. The letter went on for 3 pages about canning, laundry, butter, ledgers, poultices, and the proper storage of seed corn. It included 1 sentence about appearance, and even that sounded like something written because the form demanded it. Mrs. Vane had met Mara once. Mara Whitcomb was not unremarkable in face. She had dark auburn hair that caught red where the sun found it, gray eyes that did not look away first, and a stillness about her that made loud men lower their voices without knowing they had done it. In Council Bluffs, men had been interrupting her thoughts since she was 16 to inform her of things she had already understood. Mara did not hate being looked at. She hated being reduced to it. She had watched men praise her face while ignoring her figures, her judgment, her hands, her memory, her work. They wanted beauty in the doorway and obedience at the table. Mara wanted a household where usefulness was not treated like a lesser miracle. So when Mrs. Vane sent her Jeremiah Cole's letter, the one asking for a woman the world had overlooked, Mara read it by the kitchen window, pressed her lips together, and laughed so sharply her aunt dropped a spoon. She wrote back before supper, "Mr. Cole appears to value what others neglect. I am prepared to test the accuracy of that statement." Mrs. Vane mailed the reply. Jeremiah received it 11 days later and decided the sentence was modest. He would be wrong about nearly everything. The Union Pacific train reached North Platte on a windy Thursday in May, kicking dust along the platform hard enough to make every man turn his shoulder. Jeremiah stood beside a freight scale in his washed shirt, holding his hat with both hands. He had made a picture in his mind. Not an unkind picture, he told himself that often. Just a plain, sturdy woman with capable hands and a face that would not complicate life. A woman who would step down from the rail car, see the open Nebraska country, and think, this is enough. Passengers spilled onto the platform, a drummer with sample cases, a mother carrying a sleeping child, two young cowhands laughing too loudly, an old man coughing into a red handkerchief. Then Mara Whitcomb stepped down with one gloved hand on the rail. She wore a brown traveling dress, simple and severe, as if she had chosen the most obedient piece of clothing she owned. It did not help. The wind caught a loose strand of her hair and lifted it against her cheek. She carried one valise and a round hat box, and she found Jeremiah immediately, not by searching, but by deciding. Jeremiah's first thought was, that cannot be her. His second was, the office made a mistake. His third was more dangerous. If that is her, she knew exactly what she was doing. Mara crossed the platform. Mr. Cole, Miss Whitcomb. She looked at his face for 1 second longer than comfort allowed. You seem troubled. I expected someone else. The letter had my name on it. I expected. He stopped. Her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Less trouble? He had no safe answer. The freight agent behind them pretended not to listen with all his might. Jeremiah cleared his throat and pointed toward the wagon. Birdwood Creek is 9 miles northwest. Then we should leave before the wind buries the road. She walked past him, set her valise in the wagon, and climbed up without offering him the small helplessness he had been prepared to provide. That was the first crack in his theory. The second came before they were 2 miles from town. Mara did not ask how many rooms the house had. She did not ask if there was a parlor. She did not ask if his neighbors were respectable. She looked at the land, really looked, at the low places where last rain had collected, at the cottonwoods marking the creek, at the fence line leaning west under years of weather, at the cattle bunched near a patch of scrub as if the pasture had a secret. Your well, she said. Is it dug or bored? Jeremiah glanced over. Dug, 28 feet. Sweet water? Mostly. Mostly means after hard rain it muddies. He did not answer quickly enough. She nodded once, filing it away. A mile later, she said, Why is the hay stacked on the wind side of the shed? Jeremiah looked at her again. It has always been there. That is not a reason. That is a tradition. He blinked. Another mile passed. How many calves did you lose last winter? 3. To weather or sickness? 2 to weather, 1 to foolishness. Whose? For the first time since the depot, Jeremiah nearly smiled. Mine, I suppose. Good, that can be corrected. He had spent weeks preparing to reassure a timid woman about frontier life. Instead, he was riding beside a woman who had been on his place for 20 minutes in her mind, and had already found 3 ways to improve it. When the wagon reached the house, Jeremiah felt a small, private hope. The place was clean. He had worked late for 4 nights making sure of it. The floor had been scrubbed, the stove blacked, the bedstead tightened. He had patched the roof over the kitchen and hauled away the broken barrel by the door. Mara stepped inside. She turned slowly, not admiring, not judging, measuring. It is sound, she said. That one word affected him more than praise would have. Then she opened the pantry. Silence. What is that jar? Peaches. From when? Last summer. She lifted the jar to the window. Mr. Cole, if peaches look back at you, they are no longer peaches. By dusk, the jar was buried behind the wash shed. The pantry shelves were emptied. And Mara had written a list of supplies so precise it made Jeremiah's ears heat with embarrassment. By Saturday, she had moved the hay to the leeward wall of the shed. By Monday, she had cleaned the milk room, mended the torn window screen, and informed Jeremiah that the garden should be moved 6 yards east because the morning shade would cost him beans. By Wednesday, she made coffee strong enough to wake the dead and biscuits so light. Jeremiah took 1 bite and stared at the table as if the table had done it. You need not look frightened, she said. I am not frightened. That is how men look when they discover they have been badly fed. He ate 5. He said nothing about the 5th one. The following week, she asked for the account book. Jeremiah gave it to her with the confidence of a man handing over a document he believed was complete. Mara opened it and remained quiet. Too quiet. Finally she said, Do you know what your cattle earned you last year? Near enough. Near enough is what men say when the number is worse than they wish. She took a pencil from her trunk, sharpened it with a kitchen knife, and began rebuilding his life in columns. Feed, salt, fence wire, calving losses, rail freight, doctoring, church dues, coffee, flour. Needless nails purchased in March because he had forgotten the needless nails purchased in February. At the end, she turned the book around. Jeremiah stared at the page. His ranch had made less than he thought. Not failed, not thrived, drifted. He looked at Mara. She tapped one column. This is not poverty, this is leakage. Can you fix leakage? Yes. How? First, we stop pretending holes are weather. That autumn, North Platte began talking. It was impossible not to. Jeremiah Cole had written away for a practical bride and received a woman who looked like a portrait and worked like a foreman. She could cut pie dough without looking down. She could argue a freight rate with a railroad clerk until he discovered generosity. She could hear one cough from a calf, and know by supper whether it would pass or turn ugly. At the Methodist harvest supper, she stood beside a table of stewed apples, while Mr. Calhoun, who owned the feed store and 3 opinions on every topic, explained that the new schoolhouse should be built near the low crossing, because the land was cheaper. Mara listened. Then she asked how many days each spring the crossing stood under water. Mr. Calhoun said that was not the point. Mara said it was the floor. The room went quiet. By the end of the conversation, half the women were pretending to adjust plates so they could stay close enough to hear, and 3 men had remembered urgent business near the stove. Jeremiah watched from the doorway. He did not feel embarrassment. That surprised him. He felt something warmer and more dangerous. Pride. On the ride home, the moon sat flat and white over the prairie. Mara said, Your Mr. Calhoun dislikes being questioned by women. He dislikes being questioned by facts. Facts are not improved by becoming male. Jeremiah kept his eyes on the road. No, ma'am. She turned her head slightly. That sounded like agreement. It was. Then say it like a man who means it. He breathed through his nose. You were right about the schoolhouse. Yes, she said. Not smugly, simply, as if correctness was a tool and she had put it away in its proper place. Jeremiah knew then that his old theory was not merely weakening. It was embarrassed to still be alive. Winter came hard that year. Not picturesque winter. Not Christmas card snow softening the fences. Prairie winter. Wind that found seams. Cold that made nails ring. Sky the color of old pewter, pressing low enough to make a person feel watched. By January, Jeremiah trusted Mara's judgment in the ordinary ways and feared it in the important ones. The hay was restacked where she wanted it. The pantry held twice what it had the year before. The cracked north window was replaced with glass bought from money saved in her ledger. A row of willow cuttings stood along the west fence, tied against the wind like a promise. He did not say she had saved the ranch money. He said the ranch had run cleaner. Mara understood translation. Then came the storm. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon without drama at first, just a yellow seam in the west, and cattle turning their backs before the wind struck. By dark, the world had vanished past the lantern light. Snow did not fall so much as travel sideways with purpose. Jeremiah and Mara had already filled the water barrels, brought in wood, and hung quilts over the worst window. At midnight, the barn roof began to complain. At 1 a.m, something cracked. Not a branch, not a fence board, a heavy, splintering crack from the direction of the cattle shed. Jeremiah was on his feet before the echo finished. Mara sat up too. Which building? Shed. Blackcap is in there. He froze for half a second. Blackcap was the best cow he owned, heavy with calf and not due for 3 weeks. I'll go. So will I. No, she was already lacing her boots. Jeremiah, it's white out cold. I noticed. You can't see 5 feet. Then you need someone at 3. That ended it. They tied a rope from the kitchen door to the barn rail, and Jeremiah went first into a world made of teeth. The wind took his breath and tried to keep it. Snow filled his beard. The rope jerked in his hand, and behind him Mara moved step by step, one mitten locked to the line, the other holding the lantern low against her skirt. The shed door had blown half open. Inside, one roof beam had dropped under the weight of snow. Boards leaned at wicked angles. A hayrack had overturned. Cattle crowded the back wall, eyes wide in the lantern light. Blackcap was down, her flank heaved, her legs kicked without purchase. A broken rail pinned one side, not crushing her, but trapping her badly enough that panic was doing what injury had not. Then Jeremiah saw the second problem: labor. Too early, wrong position, and under a fallen beam in a storm that could kill a man between house and barn. For the first time in years, Jeremiah felt the old loneliness of ranch work open beneath him, the kind of problem that needs 4 hands when you only have 2. Mara set the lantern on a nail and was already pulling off her mittens. Tell me what to hold. Keep her head down if she thrashes. How? Rope over the horn, not the throat. If she rolls, let go. Mara looked at him once. If I let go, you lose the calf. If you don't, I may lose you. She took the rope. Then be quick. There was no time for argument. Jeremiah crawled beside the cow, shoulder against wet straw, hands numbing almost instantly. Blackcap groaned deep and terrible. Snow hissed through a gap in the shed wall. The lantern flame bent sideways every time the wind found it. Mara braced one boot against a post and wrapped the rope around her forearm. Not enough to trap herself, enough to hold. Blackcap surged. Mara's body snapped forward. She did not cry out. "Loose!" Jeremiah shouted. "Not loose!" she said through her teeth. Working. It took him 20 minutes to free the rail. It took longer to turn the calf. Time became breath. Hand, rope, lantern, wind, cow. Every few minutes, Jeremiah looked up and expected Mara to be gone from the strain. She was still there, hair blown loose, face pale with cold, mouth set in a line no prayer could bend. The calf came into the world just before 3 in the morning, slick and shivering, dragged from death by 2 stubborn people and a cow too mean to quit. For 1 second, no one moved. Then Blackcap lifted her head and made a low sound. The calf answered. Jeremiah sat back in the straw and felt something in him give way so quietly it almost sounded like peace. Mara tried to unwind the rope from her arm. Her hand would not obey. The cold had taken command of her fingers. Jeremiah crawled to her, pulled the rope loose, and gathered both her hands between his. They were stiff as carved wood. "You fool," he said, but his voice broke on it. She looked at him, lashes white with frost. "That was your requirement, was it not?" "What?" "Useful in weather." He breathed on her fingers, one by one, slow, steady, terrified. "My letter asked for a woman no man would look twice at," he said, "and mine told you looks were irrelevant. I thought you were hiding your face. I was trying to show you my value." The calf made another small sound behind them. Jeremiah looked down at her hands in his. "You did." She waited. The storm battered the roof. He said, "I was looking at the wrong thing before you ever got off the train." Mara did not soften all at once. She was not a woman who rewarded a man for arriving late to an obvious truth, but her fingers moved slightly inside his palms. "That," she said, "is the first sensible thing you have said since May. They married in April, when the roads could hold a wagon and the creek stopped trying to cross them." Mara wore a dark blue dress she had sewn herself because she said brown was for arrival and blue was for staying. Jeremiah wore the suit coat he had avoided for 6 years, and Reverend Sutter mislaid the ring for nearly a minute while the entire church pretended not to watch Mara notice. Afterward, Jeremiah built her a desk. Not a shelf, not a sewing corner. A desk set beneath the east window with a wide top for ledgers, letters, seed catalogs, and the books she ordered from Omaha whenever the freight allowed it. The first drawer stuck in damp weather. Mara mentioned this twice. Jeremiah fixed it on the third mention because he was learning. Over the next 24 years, the coal place changed in ways neighbors could measure. 73 acres became 162. The willow cuttings became a shelter belt, the cattle losses shrank, the garden doubled, the pantry never frightened anyone again. Mara's ledger, begun in a house with spoiled peaches and leaking money, became the cleanest private record in Lincoln County. Men who had once smiled at her face brought bills to her desk and asked if the railroad had cheated them. Women came for recipes, remedies, and advice on where to put a schoolhouse if men insisted on being decorative about drainage. Blackcap's storm calf, named Tuesday because Mara refused to sentimentalize the weather, became the beginning of the best cow line Jeremiah ever raised. He admitted this in public only once. At the feed store, years later, a young man joked that Jeremiah had been lucky his mail-order bride had turned out pretty. Jeremiah let the remark sit. Then he said, "Son, pretty was the smallest part of what arrived. The store went quiet enough to hear grain shifting in a sack." He continued, not loudly, "I asked for a woman the world had overlooked because I was scared another beautiful one would leave. What I got was a woman who had been overlooked in the only way that mattered. Men saw her face and missed her mind." No one laughed after that. By then, Jeremiah understood the bargain plainly. He had not received less danger than he asked for. He had received more truth than he knew how to request. Mara had come west because she was tired of being admired into silence. Jeremiah had written east because he was tired of being afraid into stupidity. And between them, on a strip of Nebraska land that could freeze a lantern, rot a fence, drown a crossing, and still grow wheat if treated honestly, they built a life neither one would have chosen from a photograph. That was the lesson Jeremiah Cole learned too late to be proud of, and early enough to live by. A face can open a door, but it cannot hold a rope in a blizzard. It cannot balance a ledger. It cannot read weather in a cow's flank. It cannot tell a frightened man the truth, and then stand beside him while he becomes worthy of hearing it. He had asked for a plain wife. What arrived was a woman who made plain the one thing he had never understood. Being seen is not the same as being known, and being chosen for the wrong reason is sometimes how the right person gets close enough to change the reason forever.